The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or CDC, reports that more than 1 in 6 women and 1 in 33 men have experienced an attempted or completed rape at some time in their lives. Almost 2/3 of all rapes are committed by someone who is known to the victim. The costs related to sexual violence in Minnesota are estimated to be $8 billion a year, over 3 times as much as alcohol-impaired driving. Obviously, sexual violence is a major public health issue that affects everyone, directly or indirectly, and results in long-term physical, emotional, social, and economic costs. It's a public health problem that needs to be addressed by all of us. We'll facilitate that process on today's episode of A Public Health Journal. Please stay tuned.
Welcome to A Public Health Journal, a program that explores public health issues facing our society today and tomorrow. The host of the show is Dr. Ed Ellinger, Commissioner of Health for the state of Minnesota. A Public Health Journal is sponsored by the Minnesota Department of Health and the Hennepin County Human Services and Public Health Department, all working together towards the goal of healthy people living in healthy communities.
Welcome to A Public Health Journal. Today we're going to discuss the issue of sexual violence, also referred to as sexual abuse or sexual assault. It is a problem that's too frequently experienced in our country and our state, and one that creates a significant physical, emotional, and economic consequences. Joining me in that discussion is Patty Wetterling, Director of the Sexual Violence Prevention Program at the Minnesota Department of Health. Patty, welcome to our program.
Thank you.
And it's talking about an issue that, sadly is still a major issue in our society. You've been working on this for a long time, and we've made a lot of progress, but there's still a lot of problems that need to be addressed. So let's start talking with some basics. When we're talking about sexual violence, what do you mean?
There's a lot of things that are in the, it's a very broad definition, but it can be what most people think of as rape. And that's kind of the far end of the spectrum. It is rape. It can be inappropriate touching. It can be pornography, somebody photographing somebody. It can be emotional, exploitation, especially with the teen dating situation where there's control over every movement, what you wear, who you talk to. Sexual violence can be really a broad spectrum of things. And it's a topic that people just don't like to talk about very much.
So it's really sort of, we don't like to talk about sex. So healthy sexuality, which is part, which we really want is part of everybody's existence. This is sort of the unhealthy sexuality pieces, both for the perpetrator and then on the victim of this kind of behavior. And
it causes harm to both sides. Nobody wants to, when you talk to a child, what I want to be when I grow up is never a sex offender. But if we don't intentionally put energy into healthy relationship building, we're not teaching our kids how to treat one another, and the sexual violence that they see mirrored in our society is harmful, and it's molding our future.
So you brought a slide that sort of shows the background piece of sexual violence. Maybe you could explain a little bit about what this means.
Well, sexual violence it's got a lot of the same characteristics as domestic violence, and it's about power over somebody dominating another. With sexual violence, they're using sex as the power control. It involves intimidation, isolation, coercion, often convincing somebody to do something they might not want to do. This is reflected in the student survey where, it has someone forced you to have sex when you didn't want to. It's one of the factors that is often, especially early on in the dating stages. Peer pressure, this is everybody's doing it, and we see that with sexting. And if you love me, you will send me these pictures kind of thing. This is still coercion. There's a lot of harmful things that keep it quiet. Blaming. Victims often blame themselves, like I did something to cause this. And there's threats, there's anger. It's the same domination and power over.
So as you've learned more about it, is sexual violence the same as it has always been in terms of numbers, the prevalence of it? Have we made progress? We have a better understanding so that we're addressing some of this, or are all of those things correct?
All of it's correct. I don't know that it's increased. I do know that consistently, I've been doing this for 25 years, and the FBI used to say that like 90% of these cases are not reported. I still think we have that problem. So it's an underreported crime, so we don't really know, is it going up or down? What I do know is that we've gotten used to some of the behaviors, and what we see on mainstream TV and ads and on the internet especially is the normalization of sexual harm. So people don't even recognize it. I was at a store the other day and I saw a onesie, you know, those little t-shirt things, it was blue, it was for a little boy, child, and it said, "Lock up your daughters, here I come." And I thought, that's wrong. That's not what we want. That's not the messaging of a respectful relationship. And I asked the manager to take it down. He did. But that's the kind of action we're asking people. It's like, this is not the culture that we want. This is not respectful relationships. And I think that plays a role of it. For example, pornography has gotten, so what used to be porn is now mainstream TV. Victoria's Secret ads and what's on TV is a lot more explicit and exploitive than what we used to think of. So nobody would report that because it's normalized.
How does that occur, and why has that occurred?
Yeah, I think we've sort of been groomed with the rationalization that sex sells. So people have manipulated it and put it in little by little. So we don't, my friend who's a forensic psychologist calls it hidden in front of our faces. We're not used to seeing it, and we're not used to calling it out. I think we should. Yeah,
and you also mentioned sexting, you know, where we have new tools.
Yeah.
And how has that played out, and have you started to address some of those things that were not even in existence?
They weren't
10 years ago?
Used to be, if you liked a boy, you'd send him a little note. Now you send him a nude photo on a cell phone. That's kind of the huge shift. Technology has facilitated a lot of. It's done a lot of good. It's a double-edged sword. But it has facilitated a lot of the harm. We know that statistically, most kids, we don't talk about healthy sexuality. We don't even do expansive sexual education. So most kids are learning about sex on the internet. And much of that is harmful. It's equating sex, which is normal and healthy, with violence. And that's the part that's the most harmful, is that they're getting this association early on. By age 11, that's where most boys have seen pornography. That's the known number. I believe it's quite a bit younger. Yeah. So if we as adults don't care about that and don't interrupt and call out what's appropriate and what's inappropriate, we're contributing to the harm. And it's something that parents aren't equipped to doing, because our parents didn't do it for us, and we don't know how to deal with this new mode of, I think what happens really a lot is parents will read something in the paper and it's like, who would do that? Who would send a nude photo? And that I spoke with a friend of mine who did a survey in a Minneapolis school, and over 25% of the girls had sent a photo, an inappropriate photo, to a boyfriend. So this is part of their world, and we as adults need to be part of that world and listen to it and talk to our youth and explain and define some boundaries.
And I want to talk particularly about the youth and the impact it has, but first we need to take another little break.
Okay.
We'll be back right after this message.
Hello, teenage human. It's your conscience. Do you still think it's weird that I talk to you and tell you to do things? And sometimes I dress like this and tell you to do other things with a snarky attitude. Is that normal? You tell me. Your brain and I have been talking, and we found some statistics, like as many as 1 in 3 youth report experiencing physical, sexual, or psychological abuse from a dating partner. Is that normal? No. The math suggests that about 2 of 3 are not victims of this kind of abuse. Okay, how about this? Your boyfriend calls you stupid, and you don't say anything to him. Normal? No, that's not normal. You need to talk to him and tell him that's not the way you want to be treated before it turns into a more serious problem. I mean, I am your dark side, but even I know you deserve better. Speak out, teenage human. You're the boss of how you're treated, and you deserve respect. I veto violence, because I'm worth more than that.
Welcome back. We're talking about the prevention of sexual violence with Patty Wetterling, who's the director of the Sexual Violence Prevention Program at the Minnesota Department of Health. Patty, for me, one of the most disturbing things has been really looking at sex trafficking of children, and even as you mentioned, the onesie that says, look out, girls, here I come. It seems to be that the sexualization of children has really increased over the last decade or so, and are you seeing this actually happening, and then does it have implications for sexual violence overall?
I believe that it does. We are sexualizing, especially girls, at younger and younger ages, including one of the commercial stores will give bikini underwear if you buy a pair of jeans to like 6-year-olds, and it's like inappropriate. It's just inappropriate. What we do know, and I can't say that one causes the other, but we do know is the trends. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children is the 911 center. If you think you see pornography on the internet, you call there, and they can tell you that the trends are increased more and more and more violence, and the age of the victim is younger and younger, including infants. So it's a really troubling trend. I don't understand why, in my belief, we should let kids be kids. And when they, develop into adults, that's an appropriate stage, but it's not appropriate to sexualize 6-year-olds with padded bras and bikini, or not bikini, inappropriate clothing. Yeah. They even have heels for infants, which is, why would we do that?
Mm-hmm. So what kind of impact does this have on children themselves? As they're being sexualized, what does it affect their development? Does it affect their self-esteem? Does it affect how they relate to others as they get older?
It does. There's actually brain research on development, and we know that what's troubling is that if you're watching this pornography, it is associating a pleasure center. So, sex is a normal part of our behavior, and it's something that as an adult can make you feel very good, but it's associating this pleasure center with violence. And so that young boys are taught that, to satisfy a basic human need, you have to be violent and you exercise that power over and harm the other person. And what girls are being taught is that for them to be fulfilled as a woman is to be subservient and to dress a certain way and act a certain way and to be there. If you look at a lot of the music videos, it's usually one man and all of these girls waiting on and being there, at his beck and call. And it's not providing girls the opportunity to view themselves as scientists, as astronauts, as anything they want to be. It's usually just associating them with their physical body, and it's harmful. It causes stress in adolescence. They don't ever deem themselves as lovely and beautiful as those photos that they see a woman or a girl should be. So it's caused great emotional trauma, and it's not appropriate to limit girls' potential, and it's not fair to boys that women are just there for their taking. Mm-hmm. And I honestly believe, I used to teach math, and you can live your life happily without knowing math. In today's world, there's an app for everything. But you cannot live your life happily without knowing how to interact as human beings, and that's the part we're missing. Sex is a part of our beings, and we're not talking about, the respectful nature of it all.
Mm-hmm. And in my opening comment, I mentioned that, sexual violence, most of it occurs with people that you know. So it sounds like actually we're normalizing sexual violence as part, or sexual exploitation as part of the normal relationships between individuals.
That's right, and youth who see that model it. They grow up to, tragically, you would think you would never want that in your life, but it doesn't work that way. And children who witness domestic violence often grow up assuming that that's the way it is, and we've got to interrupt those behaviors and teach a better way and model better ways.
Is Minnesota any different than any other state? Are there some states doing things differently? Or internationally, we now see a lot of sex trafficking internationally. I mean, has that complicated things?
I think that Minnesota is good at kind of being a trend setter. We have passed safe harbor legislation, which treats victims of prostitution under the age of 18 as victims, not as arresting them as what we had done in the past. And with that, we have a whole initiative of broadening the awareness of what sex trafficking is. We are aware that it happens in Minnesota. It's not something that happens just in Thailand or China or some other faraway place. It is happening here, and it's up to all of us to make that shift. So I think that we're doing a lot of things right. But we just have to be forever vigilant. One thing that I think we also, it's kind of a trap we fall into, is we try and teach our girls how to not be victims. And that's important, it's part of it. But we also have to teach our boys how to not victimize. That's a very different mindset of need. It's a set of training and skills that parents need and teachers need and community members need, so that we nurture the relationships that we want.
You talk about boys being victimized in terms of being taught to be powerful, but are they also
yes.
victims of sexual predators?
Yes.
So it is not just a male to female, it's also, males are also sometimes victimized.
They absolutely are, and that, talk about underreporting, they're way less likely to report because of social stigma. They don't want to appear weak, they don't want to have somebody question their sexuality, and it's a huge problem with. Thank you for bringing that up, because I'm usually the voice for, what about our boys? And some who are harmed exhibit those behaviors later and go on to harm. Not all, though. Yep. And that's another thing that prevents people from getting help, because they don't want anybody to think that they would ever cause that harm, so they're not going to tell that this happened to them too.
Right. Well, we've talked a lot about the problems, and I want to talk about what's being done to address the issue, and we'll do that in the last part of our program, but first we need to take a little break. We'll be back right after this message.
Were you aware that 1 out of 5 women and 1 out of 7 men first experience some type of dating violence between the ages of 11 and 17? Not all teen relationships are how they seem, and things like rape, stalking, and physical violence can be occurring. 9.6% of high schoolers report to have been purposely hit by a dating partner in a 12-month period. Even the most perfect-looking relationship can be toxic. If you ask me, this needs to stop. So spot the problem in your relationship. And do not be afraid to speak up. Address the problems and talk to an adult like your parents, a teacher, or a counselor, someone you really trust. Because together, we can veto teen dating violence.
Welcome back. We're talking about the prevention of sexual violence with Patty Wetterling, who's the director of the Sexual Violence Program at the Minnesota Department of Health. Patty, let's use this last segment to really talk about what needs to be done, what is being done, and what needs to be done to address sexual violence. Really look at the prevention pieces.
Yes.
Where do we start?
Well, we created a state plan, and we've been moving forward with many of the ideas that are in the plan. But the first goal is to create an environment that respects one another sexually and physically and emotionally, and create a world that doesn't tolerate sexual violence. So we need to change the social norms that are contributing to it. We know we've talked a lot about the problem, and I think that those pieces of the problem can also be part of the solution. For example, video games. You get points for picking up a prostitute. You get points for going back and killing her. You get points for harm, causing harm, killing a police officer. Those are really harmful. Those are all the things that we don't want kids to do. So there's counters to that. There's the better messaging. I would love to have the gaming and the people who create the better messages, and those who are creating the videos that cause harm to contribute to some prevention material.
Any progress in that happening?
It's a possibility. We are addressing it. One of the other things that we're addressing is if you get off the light rail and do a tour, you're walking with your 6-year-old to go to a Twins game, you pass by a lot of strip joints that are marketing, turn in your Twins ticket for a free lap dance or free admission, So we've met with the Twins organization. Do you like that co-branding? Is that what you want? Because I think of apple pie and family. And so we're trying to get the signage, and the demonstrations of a family outing and what kids see on the way there to be more respectful.
So if somebody sees something that really is inappropriate, and I mean, you've been at this for a while, so you're going to go up to the store clerk and say, I'm sorry, you need to take this down. What should people do if they see something that's really offensive? How can they really interact and make a difference?
Well, we've done that with billboards that were up. There was one, fast, cheap, and easy for a cell phone, had a young teenage girl on the thing, and enough people called, they took it down within a week. So don't ever, I would encourage people to never think that their voice doesn't matter. Writing a letter, making a phone call, they know that for every phone call there's like 10,000 people who didn't bother to call. So you're representing a whole bunch, but just making that call, writing that letter, speaking up in your community. Community level activism is absolutely huge. That's how the no smoking thing started, was one community decided we're not going to do that. And I think that that's one of the things we're trying to do, is build champion communities where they've got good policies, where they've got a good reporting system, they know the response from law enforcement, they've got trained psychologists, trained school personnel, bus drivers, all the people who see and can set the tone for a respectful environment really hugely matters.
How about sex education in schools? And it's been controversial, and some people say, no, that belongs in the home, but it's not getting done in the home. How do we really get a healthy sexuality curriculum into the schools?
That's been
I'm assuming that would be...
It would be helpful. We know that it would be helpful. If you even talk to pedophiles and those who harm children, they will tell you that those who know appropriate body language or body parts, they're going to walk away from that person because they know that they're educated and they've had the talk in their home. So, it's a safety factor. You would think that every parent would want their child to be safe from sexual harm. And I think that we're going to have to call it something different other than sex ed, because it's really more than that. It's about human development. It's about respectful relationships. It's about boundaries. And it's about becoming a contributing person in our culture. So it's really bigger. I think that people need to see the big picture part of that. If we didn't tell our kids at some point in life your teeth are going to start falling out and then they got to lose tooth, they'd be freaked. But we tell them, this is part of growing up. And they also need to know the sexual part of what's normal behavior and what do you do with these feelings and how do you treat one another when you're experiencing different feelings. As an adolescent, especially, that it would be far better for a school to be teaching this than for them to be learning about the violence on pornography, and that's where they're getting it now.
How about the faith community? What role do they play?
Faith communities have been really active, especially in the anti-trafficking initiative, and many of them have been trendsetters in policy, like having too deep coaching rules, or one-on, if you're doing special education or something with a child, that there's two adults there, so that you're not setting up a situation where it's easy to harm. But I think that it was really, your opening comments were so brilliant. It is mostly someone that is known to the child, and when you get to the adolescent age, it's often one child harming another. And when we see it as an adult, we can call the child aside, we can talk to the parents, we can talk to the victim, you can do restorative justice, you can explain that this is harmful, that this person didn't like that behavior, and interrupt it and give them a better way. And I think that it's all part of what we know hasn't worked, is just locking them up, arresting, incarcerating, and registering, and we don't want that track, especially for our youth. So if we can avoid it and find some alternative, hold somebody accountable, but give them some alternative ways of being respectful to one another, that's a piece of it.
Well, we've got about 30 seconds left. What would be some positive news that you give?
Positive news: we are engaging more men in the prevention initiative. We've got a strategic plan. We've got a lot of communities around the state who are aggressively addressing this problem, and we are making some progress. And I just want to say, if you have any cause to question, you look at our youth, and we know that we need to build a world that's worthy of our children, and that they need to have the tools.
Right. Well, Patty, just tip of the iceberg with this conversation, but I know there's lots of information on the MDH website.
Yes.
And the state plan is there for people to look at, and lots of good recommendations. So thanks for being with us. This was very helpful.
Thank you.
And I'll be back with a closing comment right after this message.
He made fun of me. He got mean.
I will not accept that.
I will not accept that.
I will not accept that.
I thought it was normal, but it's not normal.
I said no, but he didn't listen.
I spoke up.
I spoke up.
I spoke up.
I spoke up.
Speak out.
Speak out.
Because that's not the way most people act.
It's not the way it really is. But he tried to make me think that it was.
We do not accept that.
Pearl Buck once said that one faces the future with one's past. The accuracy of that statement particularly plays out with sexual violence. Negative and violent sexual experiences, especially when these experiences occur in childhood, affect every aspect of an individual's long-term physical, emotional, and economic health. This means that if we want to really improve the overall long-term health of our society and create a better world, we need to focus a lot more of our attention on our children and provide them with the safest and most supportive and nurturing environment that we can, especially in the area of sexual health and sexual safety. Certainly we need to continue to provide the restorative services for the people who have been damaged by sexual violence. But if we are to really make a difference in this world, we need to focus on preventing these problems in the first place. To do this will require changing many of our society's norms that support, condone, or ignore sexual and violent messages and behaviors, which contribute to sexual violence. This means that we need to stop using exploitive images of women and children in the media and stop equating masculine sexuality with power and control. We need to particularly focus our efforts on the influential period of childhood and support prevention of events during that time that increase the risk of adverse health outcomes down the road. Preventing adverse childhood experiences, especially in the area of sexual violence, is truly a public health approach to a major public health problem. Sexual violence prevention is a major problem in our society, something that we need to address. Thanks for watching. I hope you can join us again next time on A Public Health Journal.